Hey folks, welcome back. Chris in Central Pennsylvania. A recent article in the New York Times shows you just how sour and unpatriotic and how much the New York Times hates the United States, despite the fact that they publish in freedom and safety here in these very United States that they seem to hate. I'm referring to a story about a goodie bag for South African refugees arriving in America. A look inside the welcome bags planned for white South African refugees. Well, first off, that's a lie. It's not for white South African refugees. It's for South Africans fleeing from racial persecution. And if you saw last night my published interview with Indians who are definitely not white South Africans, and of course the coloreds and other Indians and other coloreds and black South Africans who I've interviewed, once again spreading propaganda to create hatred and division in America. The fourth estate's role is to hold the government accountable and to inform the public. Instead, the New York Times chooses to mislead the public with endless propaganda and lies. Now, the authors say the United States is putting together a bag with children's book on so-called reverse racism and with a document that defends the country's founding on the basis of slavery. Well, I didn't see the children's book, but unlike the New York Times, I've actually seen what these households get. So there may be a children's book, but it wasn't shown to me. And there's no document that defends the founding of slavery. That's poppycock. That's just utter bullshit. They never saw these documents, so they're making false claims. They say they'll also get an Android tablet, an American flag, and copies of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And who would have a problem with that? An American flag for new arrivals in America and copies of our founding documents, the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, on the eve of the nation's 250th anniversary of its Declaration of Independence? Only a sourpuss or a person who hates America would have a problem with that. They'll also receive a packet of literature that provides a sanitized, Trump-approved view of American and South African history, one that criticizes racial equality and civil rights laws and promotes claims of discrimination against white people. Well, that's poppycock. I've looked at the documents. They don't criticize racial equality. Those are just lies. And they sure as hell don't criticize civil rights. In fact, if you read the documents, you'll see that in the very beginning, Martin Luther King is the second image in the book. And then after that, shortly after that, comes Frederick Douglass. And when it comes to claims about America's challenges to its founding principles, the first issue placed in the book, the 1776 report, is in fact the issue of slavery. The welcome bags include a report commissioned by Mr. Trump during his first term that downplays the role of slavery in the country's founding, and a children's book accusing South Africa's government of favoring the black population. Well, once again, they misspelled black. It's an adjective, not a noun. They've capitalized it, so that's just poppycock. So that's the first problem here. That is not true. I don't know about this children's coloring book. I didn't see any such document from the refugees who arrived 2 days ago. And as far as downplaying the role of slavery, that's just a lie. This is the 1776 report right here, a copy of which is given to the refugees in celebration of return 50th anniversary. Slavery, right here, one page, a whole second page, including an image of Lincoln. And then it's carried on to a third page. The issue of slavery gets more coverage in this book than virtually any other topic. Nearly 3 pages in this book, the 1776 report. And this puts slavery in its proper context, belying the fairy tale and the racial propaganda perpetrated by the fraudulent 1619 Project, claiming that the original sin of America is slavery, that the country was founded on the basis of slavery. That's utter nonsense. This lays out the true history of America. Now, they claim their proposal for the bags was still being finalized when they wrote the report. Trump's aides have planned to give them to a group of South African Afrikaners who enter the United States in the coming weeks, according to government documents obtained by the New York Times and officials familiar with the matter. Once again, treasonous Americans betraying the public's trust, releasing information that's sensitive to the government. This is not something that they should have gotten from an official. It should have been released by the government. And it's not for South African Afrikaners. Once again, the propaganda by the New York Times, seeking to divide this country on a basis of race. An Indian South African just arrived here on the same flight as those white South Africans. Now, this official, who of course is betraying the nation and the trust given to them, spoke on condition anonymity to detail plans that have not been announced. It's not clear how much the bags cost or how much the cost was being paid by taxpayers. It's unusual for the government to provide welcome gifts of this kind for refugees. Well, 2 points about it being unusual. It's also unusual for the country to celebrate its 250th anniversary of its Declaration of Independence. It's an unusual time You geniuses at the New York Times. So without giving the full context to what's going on here, they want you to believe this is something that's unwarranted. This is the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding. Unlike these scumbags at the New York Times who hate this country, everybody loved America in 1776 despite Vietnam and Watergate, and we all celebrated the 200th anniversary of the bicentennial proudly. But the Fourth Estate is actively undermining American unity today, and this is an example of it. This is a highly unusual event, the 250th anniversary of our independence, and therefore the administration is putting welcome packets together for people arriving here. That's not unusual. It's an unusual event. It makes sense. It's warranted. Additionally, isn't it a good idea for people who arrive in this country and get safety here to be handed information about the founding of this country, its principles, so they know what they're getting into? Or is this just a way station for people to come suck benefits off of the taxpayer? What does the New York Times think the refugee program is? It's for safety. And many people eventually become citizens. What a great way to start them by giving them material, which, by the way, is free. There's no question about how much this costs the taxpayer. The books provided here are all free from Prager and from the American Heritage Institute. The Heritage Institute gives these free, and Prager gives them free. Now, the flag, I don't know who paid for that, and I don't know who paid for the Kindle. The Amazon tablet is what it is. They call it an Android tablet. Yes, it is technically using Android operating system, but it's not a Samsung $700 tablet. This is a $100 Amazon Fire tablet. Probably donated by Amazon, hoping to get customers to sign up for Prime. If not, I'm sure the government probably didn't pay much for them on a wholesale basis. But instead of celebrating the arrival of people fleeing from persecution, the New York Times continues to try to divide this country on a racial basis. The racial hatred of people. Shame on them. What a bunch of sour pusses. And what a bunch of misleading propaganda. These documents don't ignore or dispel or discount the slave era. In fact, they talk about it in full context, unlike the 1619 Project or the New York Times. Oh, by the way, aren't they the organization that sponsored that propaganda that hates America? The New York Times? I think so. What say you, America? Are you fed up with this nonsense? Why don't they tell the whole story instead of lying about it? Because it doesn't fit their narrative. And real media, real journalists uncover the truth, not their version of the truth. Slavery is a horrible institution. We lost 600,000 people fighting to end that institution. 7 of my 8 great-great-grandfathers fought in that Civil War from Maryland and Virginia for the Union to end slavery. And I have to sit here and listen to this poppycock from people lying about this country. These are welcome packets for new arrivals. It'd be nice if we could give them to everybody. What say you folks? Cheers.